I knew my marriage was in trouble the second my wife smiled at her phone and then looked up at me like I was the interruption. That was the part that shattered me. Not the secret itself, but the ease of it. The casual way she slipped her phone face down beside her wine glass and said, "Why are you staring at me like that?" As if I were the one bringing poison into our kitchen. 10 minutes earlier, we had been talking about paint colors for the guest room. The kind of ordinary married conversation that tricks you into thinking your life is solid. And then one expression on her face made the whole house feel staged. I remember laughing, this dry, stupid laugh that did not sound like me, and saying, "Who keeps texting you this late?" She didn't even blink. "Megan from work." Smooth, immediate, practiced. Then she stood up, kissed the top of my head, and added, "You're getting paranoid lately." Like she was soothing a child. Like my instincts were some embarrassing flaw she had to manage. The thing is, I wanted to believe her because believing her meant I got to keep my life. We had been married 9 years, together almost 12, and I had built my identity around being her husband, the steady one, the man who fixed the sink, remembered her mother's birthday, warmed up her side of the bed in winter. I told myself stress was making me suspicious. I told myself her distance, the late meetings, the locked bathroom door, the way she started taking calls in the laundry room were all temporary. But that night, after she fell asleep with her back to me and one hand curled around that phone under her pillow, I lay there staring into the dark, replaying every weird moment from the last 3 months until they stopped looking random and started looking like a pattern. At 2:11 in the morning, when her screen lit up again, I saw one line on the lock screen before it vanished. "I miss you already." My chest went hollow. I slid out of bed so carefully I was shaking, took my keys, and sat in my car in the driveway like a man hiding from his own life. I kept hearing her voice from earlier, soft and offended. "If you don't trust me, what are we even doing?" And I realized that was the trick, wasn't it? She had turned my confusion into guilt so many times that I had started apologizing for noticing things. By morning, I was running on maybe 20 minutes of sleep and pure dread. But I still went back inside, still kissed her cheek, still watched her leave in a hurry wearing the perfume she used to save for date nights. She forgot her tablet on the counter. I swear to God I stared at it for a full minute like it was a loaded weapon. Then a message banner slid across the screen with a heart next to a man's name I knew better than my own. It was my best friend. And the message said, "Did he believe you?" That message didn't disappear fast enough, and I just stood there staring at his name on her screen like my brain refused to process it, like it had to be some glitch, some overlap of contacts, anything but the one explanation that made my stomach turn inside out. I remember whispering his name out loud, like saying it would make it less real. And then I actually laughed again, quieter this time, because this was the same guy who sat at our table every Sunday, who toasted our anniversary with cheap whiskey and told me I was lucky to have her. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the tablet, but I forced myself to unlock it, telling myself I needed context. I needed something that would explain it away, because there was no version of my life where both my wife and my best friend were lying to my face at the same time, and I had somehow missed it. The thread opened, and it wasn't new. It wasn't some one-time mistake or a blurred line. It was weeks, maybe months of messages stacked on top of each other, conversations that started casual and then shifted into something intimate, something that made my chest tighten the more I read, because it wasn't just betrayal. It was familiarity. Inside jokes that used to belong to us. Phrases she used to text me when I was stuck late at work. I saw my own life being rewritten in real time, like I had been slowly edited out of my own marriage while still showing up every day, still playing my part. At one point she had written, "He's been so distant lately." And he replied, "He has no idea, does he?" And I had to sit down because my legs just stopped working under me, because the version of me they were talking about, the clueless husband, was exactly who I had been. I don't even remember deciding to call him. I just know my finger hit his name, and I held the phone to my ear while my heart pounded so loud I could barely hear the ringing. He picked up on the third ring, casual, like always. "Hey man, what's up?" And I swear, for a second, I almost believed everything was normal again, that I had imagined it, until I said, "I'm looking at your messages with my wife right now." And there was this silence, this heavy, suffocating silence, that told me everything before he even spoke. Then he let out a slow breath and said, "You weren't supposed to find out like that." Like that was the problem, not what they'd done, but the timing of my discovery. By the time she walked back through the front door 20 minutes later, earlier than she ever came home, I was sitting at the kitchen table with her tablet in front of me, my phone in my hand, and something inside me had gone completely still. She froze when she saw me, her eyes darting to the screen, then back to my face, and for just a second I saw it. Not guilt, not fear, but calculation, like she was already deciding which version of the truth she was about to sell me. I slid the tablet toward her and said, "Do you want to explain this, or do you want me to read it out loud?" And she didn't even hesitate before shaking her head, letting out this tired sigh and saying, "You're seriously going through my stuff now? That's where we are?" I remember the exact way her voice sounded in that moment. Not panicked, not even defensive in the way I expected, but irritated, like I had just inconvenienced her day, like catching her in something this big was somehow my failure instead of hers. I felt something twist inside my chest as I stared at her, waiting for the crack in her composure, waiting for her to break and just admit it so I could at least hold on to something honest. But she didn't. She crossed her arms and leaned against the counter like we were arguing about bills, not about the fact that she had been lying to me with the one person I trusted more than anyone else. I said his name slowly, deliberately, watching her face for any sign of shame, and she just shrugged, actually shrugged, and said, "You're making this into something it's not." And I swear that was the moment it stopped feeling like confusion and started feeling like humiliation. I pushed the tablet toward her harder this time, the screen lighting up with their messages, with her words, with the version of her that I apparently never knew. And I said, "I read enough," trying to keep my voice steady, even though it felt like it was breaking apart. "You don't get to tell me what this is." And she laughed under her breath. Not kindly, not nervously, but cold, like I was being dramatic, like I was embarrassing myself. "Oh my God," she said, rubbing her temple. "You went through weeks of messages and you still don't understand context." And I just stared at her because I didn't even know what that meant. What context could possibly make any of that okay? And that's when she stepped closer, lowered her voice, and said, "We were talking, that's it. You're acting like I cheated on you." Like the word itself was something she could just refuse to acknowledge into existence. I felt my hands curl into fists without even realizing it. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I needed something to hold on to that wasn't falling apart. And I said, "You told him I'm distant. You told him I have no idea. You told him you miss him." And her expression shifted just slightly, not into guilt, but into something sharper, something defensive and almost cruel. And she snapped back, "Maybe if you actually paid attention to me, I wouldn't have to talk to someone else." And that hit harder than anything else because it wasn't just a lie. It was a reversal, a way to make this my fault, to rewrite the entire situation so that I was the reason she did what she did. I took a step back, shaking my head, feeling like I couldn't breathe in my own house. And I said, "So you're blaming me for this?" And she didn't hesitate, not even for a second. She just looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I'm saying this didn't happen in a vacuum." And then, like that wasn't enough, like she needed to push it further, she added, "And if you're being honest, you've checked out of this marriage for a long time." And I actually felt my vision blur for a second, because I didn't recognize the person standing in front of me anymore. The woman who used to fall asleep on my chest, the one who used to text me she missed me. She was gone, replaced by someone who could look at me in the middle of betrayal and make me feel like I was the one who broke us. My phone buzzed again in my hand, and I glanced down without thinking, expecting another message from him, another piece of this mess I didn't want. But instead, it was a text from her number, sent just seconds ago, even though she was standing right in front of me, and when I opened it, my stomach dropped because it said, "Don't say anything stupid. You'll regret it." I felt something inside me drop into my stomach as I read that message. Because there was no delay, no hesitation. It had been sent while she was standing right there in front of me, looking me in the eye like nothing had happened, like she wasn't actively controlling the situation from two angles at once. I slowly lifted my head and met her gaze, holding up my phone without saying a word. And for the first time since she walked in, something flickered across her face. Not guilt, not even fear, but irritation that she'd been caught slipping. "Really?" I said quietly, my voice coming out calmer than I felt. "You're texting me threats while standing in the same room?" And she rolled her eyes like I was missing the point, like I was still somehow behind in a game she had been playing for months without me knowing. "You're blowing this way out of proportion," she said, stepping closer again, her tone softening in that calculated way I used to mistake for concern. "I'm trying to stop you from making a scene you can't take back." And I actually felt my jaw tighten because that word scene kept echoing in my head, like this entire situation was just some overreaction on my part instead of a complete collapse of everything I thought was real. I shook my head, running a hand through my hair, trying to ground myself, and said, "You think this is about a scene? You think I care about embarrassment right now?" And she sighed again, louder this time, like she was exhausted with me, like I was the difficult one. "Yes," she snapped. "Because you always do this. You spiral and make everything worse instead of just talking like an adult." That hit me in a way I didn't expect, not because it was true, but because of how easily she said it, how confidently she rewrote my personality to fit her version of events. And I realized she wasn't just lying about what happened. She was actively reshaping reality so that I questioned my own reactions. "Talking," I said, almost laughing again, that hollow sound creeping back. "You've been lying to me for months with him, and now you want to talk?" And the moment I said his name again, her expression hardened completely. The softness gone, replaced with something colder. "Stop saying it like that," she snapped. "Like he's some criminal. He's your friend. He cares about you too." And I swear my entire body went numb, hearing her defend him, hearing her put him on my side like this was some twisted misunderstanding instead of betrayal. I took a step back from her, needing space, needing air, because the room suddenly felt too small, too tight, and I said, "I talked to him," watching her carefully this time, watching for the reaction she couldn't control. And there it was, just for a second, that flash of panic before she masked it again. "Of course you did," she said quickly, too quickly. "And I'm sure you twisted everything I said just like you're doing now." And I felt something snap at that, something final, because now she wasn't just denying it. She was building a version of events where I was the unreliable one, the one misinterpreting everything, the one causing damage. My phone buzzed again, and this time I didn't even have to look to know it was him, like my body had already learned the pattern in the last hour. And when I finally checked, my chest tightened as I read it. Because it wasn't an apology, it wasn't even an explanation. It just said, "Don't listen to her. She's not telling you everything." That message hit harder than anything else so far, because it cracked open something even worse than what I'd already seen. The idea that this wasn't just betrayal, but layers of it, pieces I didn't even know existed yet. And I felt my chest tighten as I looked back up at her, trying to match the woman in front of me with the one in my phone, with the one he was warning me about. "What is that supposed to mean?" I asked, holding up the screen again, my voice lower now, more controlled, like I was bracing myself for something bigger than I could handle. And she didn't even look surprised this time. She just shook her head slowly and let out a small laugh, like she'd been expecting this exact moment. "Of course he'd say that," she muttered, almost to herself. And then louder, sharper, "He's trying to save himself." I frowned, my stomach twisting again because nothing about this made sense. Not the way she was reacting, not the way he was warning me, and definitely not the feeling that I was standing in the middle of something much deeper than I understood. "Save himself from what?" I pressed, stepping closer despite every instinct telling me to back away, to run from this entire conversation. And she looked at me like I was finally asking the right question, like this was the part she had been waiting for. "From you finding out the truth," she said, her voice dropping, almost calm now. And something about that calm scared me more than anything else she'd said so far. I shook my head, trying to stay grounded, trying to hold on to something real. "I already know the truth," I said, gesturing toward the tablet, toward the messages, toward everything that had already torn through me. But she just tilted her head slightly, studying me in a way that made my skin crawl. "No," she said quietly. "You know a version of it." And I felt my pulse spike because that word version sounded too familiar. Like everything she'd been doing since she walked in was about rewriting reality, about controlling which pieces I saw and which ones I didn't. "Then tell me," I snapped, louder than I meant to. "Tell me what I don't know." For a second, she just stared at me, and I could see the calculation again, the way she was weighing what to say, how to say it, how to keep control. And then she took a slow breath and said, "You think this started recently?" Her tone almost clinical, like she was explaining something simple to someone who just couldn't keep up. "You think this is about a few messages, a few weeks of talking?" And I felt my stomach drop because of the way she said it, like she was about to expand the timeline in a way I wasn't ready for. "So how long?" I asked, my voice barely steady now. And she didn't hesitate this time, didn't soften it, didn't try to ease me into it. "Long enough," she said flatly. And then she looked me dead in the eyes and added, "Long enough that you should probably stop pretending you didn't notice something was wrong." And that hit like a punch because it twisted everything again. Made it sound like this was inevitable. Like I had somehow allowed it to happen by not seeing it sooner. I felt my hands start to shake again, anger mixing with something heavier, something closer to despair. And I said, "You're unbelievable," because I didn't have anything else left to say that wouldn't break me completely. My phone buzzed again in my hand, and this time when I looked down, my chest went cold, because it wasn't just another message. It was a photo, sent from him. And for a second, I didn't even want to open it. Didn't want to see whatever proof he thought would explain everything. But I did anyway. And the moment it loaded, I felt like the ground disappeared under me. Because it wasn't recent. It wasn't even from this year. It was a picture of the two of them together, taken in my house, on my birthday. I don't think I breathed for a full 5 seconds after that image loaded, because my brain refused to accept what my eyes were seeing, like it was trying to protect me by slowing everything down. It was my living room, my couch, the same stupid throw blanket she insisted on keeping even though it never matched anything. And there they were sitting close, too close, her head tilted toward him in that familiar way she used to do with me when she was comfortable, when she was happy. I could see the date stamped in the corner, my birthday, the night I thought she was just distracted because she was tired from planning dinner, the night he showed up late with a gift and slapped me on the back like nothing in the world was wrong. My hands started trembling so hard I had to grip the edge of the table just to stay upright, and I remember whispering, "No, no, that's not real," even though it was right there, undeniable. She didn't rush to deny it. That was the part that broke something deeper than anger. She just watched me, almost patiently, like she was waiting for me to catch up, like this was a conversation we should have had a long time ago. "You weren't supposed to see that," she said finally, and her tone wasn't apologetic. It was annoyed, like this was another inconvenience, another problem I had created by discovering something I wasn't meant to. I looked up at her slowly, my vision blurring at the edges, and said, "In my house, on my birthday," each word feeling heavier than the last, like I was dragging them out of my chest, and she let out a breath and rubbed her temple again like this was exhausting for her. "You're focusing on the wrong thing," she said, and I swear I felt my entire body go cold, because there was no way she just said that, no way she could look at that picture and tell me I was focusing on the wrong thing. "The wrong thing?" I repeated, my voice cracking despite everything I was trying to hold together, and she stepped closer, lowering her voice again like she was trying to calm me down, like I was the unstable one. "Yes," she said. "You're stuck on when and where instead of why." And I actually took a step back from her because that sentence felt like it belonged in someone else's nightmare, not my life. "Why?" I snapped, the word coming out sharper than anything I'd said so far. "You think there's a reason that makes this okay?" And she didn't flinch, didn't even hesitate. She just met my eyes and said, "There are reasons you've been ignoring for a long time." And that was it. That was the line she kept going back to, that everything happening right now was somehow rooted in me, in what I failed to see, what I failed to give, what I failed to be. My phone buzzed again, and I didn't want to look. I didn't want another piece of this, but I couldn't stop myself. And when I opened it, my chest tightened even more because it wasn't just him this time. It was a forwarded message, something older, something she had sent him, and the words hit me like a punch because they weren't about sneaking around or hiding. They were about me. "He's finally about to get that promotion," she had written. "Once that happens, everything changes." That message didn't just hurt. It rearranged everything I thought I understood about the last few months of my life. Because suddenly all those late nights, all those important meetings, all the times she asked about my work with that careful interest, it wasn't support. It was timing. I felt my throat tighten as I read it again, slower this time, like maybe I had misunderstood, like maybe there was another way to interpret it, but there wasn't. "Once that happens, everything changes." I looked up at her, my voice quieter now, almost empty, and said, "What does that mean?" And she didn't answer right away, which somehow made it worse, because it told me there was something she was deciding whether or not to admit. "You're reading into things again," she said finally, but it sounded weaker this time, less certain, like even she knew that line wasn't going to hold anymore. I shook my head slowly, holding the phone up between us like it was evidence in a trial I never agreed to be part of. "No," I said. "This isn't me reading into anything. This is you planning something." And I watched her face carefully, looking for that reaction she couldn't control. And there it was again. Just for a second. That flicker of something real before she buried it under that same cold composure. "You always do this," she snapped, her tone sharpening again as she straightened up, like she was regaining ground. "You take one thing and build an entire narrative around it." And I felt something in me almost give out at how easily she said it, how naturally she flipped everything back onto me. "Then explain it," I pushed, stepping closer again despite the way my chest felt like it was caving in. "Explain why you're talking about my promotion like it's some kind of turning point." And she let out a frustrated breath, pacing a step away like she needed distance now. "Because it is a turning point," she said, turning back to face me, her eyes locked onto mine. And there was something different there now, something more direct, less filtered, like she was done pretending this was small. "You've been chasing that promotion for years," she continued, her voice steady. "And everything in our life has revolved around it. Your hours, your stress, your priorities." And I felt that familiar shift again, that attempt to reframe everything as my fault, to build a foundation where her actions somehow made sense. "And that justifies this?" I cut in, gesturing between us, toward the tablet, toward the messages, toward the photo that was still burned into my mind, and she shook her head immediately. "No," she said, "but it explains why things changed." And I could feel my patience snapping, my grip on any sense of control slipping as the conversation kept circling back to the same place, the same deflection, the same refusal to actually take responsibility. My phone buzzed again, and this time when I looked down, my heart started pounding harder than before, because it wasn't just another message. It was a full thread he had sent, screenshots of their conversation from weeks ago, and right at the top was a line from her that made my stomach drop so fast it felt like I might actually collapse. "Once he signs the new contract," she had written, "we won't have to pretend anymore." I felt my entire body go cold reading that line, like everything inside me just shut down to survive what my mind was finally putting together, Because this wasn't just emotional betrayal or some hidden relationship spiraling out of control. This was planned, timed, structured around my life like I was just a stepping stone they were both waiting to move past. Pretend, I repeated under my breath, the word barely leaving my mouth. And when I looked up at her, really looked at her, I didn't see hesitation anymore. I didn't see panic. I saw something worse. I saw acceptance, like she was done hiding because there was no point anymore. You were waiting, I said slowly, each word feeling heavier than the last. You were waiting for me to sign that contract, and she didn't deny it. She didn't even try this time. She just crossed her arms and let out a long breath like this was inevitable. It wasn't like that at first, she said. But even as she said it, there was no conviction behind it, no urgency to make me believe her, just a tired explanation that came too late to matter. I let out a hollow laugh, shaking my head because that was the part that destroyed me. Not just what they did, but how long they had been building toward it while I was still showing up every day thinking I was fighting for us. So what was the plan? I asked, my voice steadier now in a way that scared even me, because the anger had burned through into something colder, something more focused. You stay with me until the money comes in, until everything's secure, and then what? You walk out and start over with him? And she finally reacted to that, finally showed something real. But it wasn't guilt, it was frustration. You're simplifying it, she snapped, running a hand through her hair. There are things you don't understand about how this works. And I just stared at her, because that sentence sounded like a business decision, not a marriage. Then make me understand, I said, stepping closer one last time, needing to hear it from her, needing the final piece that would either break me completely or finally make sense of everything that had been tearing me apart for the last hour. She looked at me for a long second, her expression unreadable, and then she said something that I don't think I'll ever be able to forget, something that made every memory I had with her feel like it had been rewritten from the inside out. I didn't think you'd actually get it, she said quietly. I thought you'd fail like you always do. The silence after that felt suffocating, like the walls of the house were closing in around me. And for a second, I couldn't even process what she had just admitted, because it wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was expectation. It was her building a future where I wasn't just left behind. I was never supposed to succeed in the first place. My phone buzzed again in my hand, but this time I didn't even want to look, because I already knew nothing on that screen could possibly make this worse, and somehow that thought terrified me more than anything else.